Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and The Daily Critique. Today's image was submitted by George, who's an advanced photographer. We don't have the metadata here, but we do have the backstory. George recently created this image on the Mindful Eye Zion National Park workshop. One of the first things I want to mention about the image relative to the backstory is that George shot this image on the way to the quote-unquote location for our afternoon assignment. It can be so easy, particularly as a landscape photographer, to get into the habit of picking a place on the map or in the park and then loading all of your gear into a pack and think that you're being sort of very productive and doing great work by putting your head down and quickly getting there. And to me, that's sort of the antithesis of exhibiting one of the hallmarks of a creative person. All of your great shots, all the shots that you had the most fun making, all the shots that resonate with other people the most, they all have one thing in common, and that is, first, you said, all right, now is the point where I'm going to actually be a photographer. Now is the point where I'm going to engage the creative process, and just cultivating a habit and an attitude where you give yourself permission more and more often to just get going. A very, very powerful way to become more creative. When I look at this image from a design standpoint, it's a real classic in terms of having a main subject, this rock, and then as you include other things, with George's lens choice and the framing, the other things form a visual unity or harmony with the main idea, and here a real classical shot in terms of rhythm. Main idea rock and this shape, and then this shape in a whole variety of ways ends up playing out almost everywhere in the image. It's in the shape of the pool the rock is sitting in. It's in this flow pattern. We had rain on the first day of the workshop, and this wash pattern on the mud and the canyon floor is obviously rhyming the main idea in a variety of ways. Beautiful how that transitions into the reflection of a pebble sky that not only rhymes the main idea from a shape standpoint, it rhymes the pattern in the mud, and then it harmonizes the color of the rock. And speaking of color, a really beautiful image in terms of a sort of a washed kind of painterly color pair of blue and orange. And in the background of the image, the same shape plays out. The overall shape of the pool back here rhymes the main idea. This rock is more angular, but still it's rhyming sort of this triangular kind of disc shaped idea. This is same shape, and this is the same shape in the image. When I look at this image, the one area that I question a little bit, I love this image so much, loved it when I saw it on the workshop, is this area back here. There's a lot of dynamic symmetry that plays out if you just look at the different zones of this image. And then, if you go back and forth here and here, just the shape of the rock itself, very symmetrical. Big symmetry over here just on this side. And then back here in the background, if I look from side to side, this is sort of different. And if I move from corner to corner, there's a difference for me in terms of texture and pattern. And this to me is more rhythmic, moving in this direction. And this is one area that I think about changing. But before I change it, if I'm thinking about editing an image, in addition to just balance and color and line and positive and negative space, applied visual energy and pathway, all these things, the other level that I'll think about if I'm starting to edit an image is what sort of archetype does this image represent? And if the archetype that's represented is more abstract or starts to push towards the surreal, then that a lot of times will free me up in my mind to make changes that sort of go in that direction. And because George has not included the sky here, and he's shooting down, and this could sort of be a canyon anywhere, because the colors are already a little bit painterly and something else, there's a real powerful archetype for me of sort of prehistory in the lower part of the image. This to me is sort of a scale shape on a lizard, and then this, all this pattern starts to actually make me think of sort of the armor on a dinosaur. And so I start to think, there's something about this that's so abstract and prehistoric, I might start to push this more towards a surreal type of image. And one of the ways that we can create a surreal feeling, Jerry Usselman in the old days as a photographer who did this the hard way using multiple enlargers, John Paul Capernegro Jr. is a contemporary photographer who does this a lot, is take a part of the image and then flip it and duplicate it. And I create this obvious sort of surreal pattern, particularly where the two sides meet up. And so I did this in this image to create more of a symmetrical balance in the background, and then it creates this sort of surreal idea in here as kind of the archetype of a face, or lots of other archetypes in here, sort of eyes, and these shapes in here also play off of the main idea, and now these two ideas play off of each other in a way that's balanced. And from there, I just had fun with this image. I started to push it more and more towards the surreal. I added a lot more blue. I popped local contrast using the curves adjustment. I came in the levels and made that even more dramatic. Then I added a low end, just kind of continuing to push the drama. And then when I got here, what I thought of was, wow, this would be a really cool image to look at in black and white. There's so much form. It's so graphic. It's so simple from a color standpoint. And real quick, it's just fun to think about the theory of the black and white adjustment layer. We could see that we basically had blues and kind of oranges. And the thing about oranges, it's going to have red and yellow and magenta in it, some aspect of that. Those blues are going to have cyans and blues. The only color that we really didn't have in the image was anything that was close to green, so it's no surprise that when we move the green slider, nothing really happens. But boy, if we start to move the red slider, there's going to be a lot that's going to happen that could be very dramatic. If we move the yellow slider, same thing, and we come in and we move the blue and the cyan slider, same kind of thing. We could start to push towards a really dramatic interpretation of this image just based on playing around with the sliders and the black and white adjustment layer. And so just something else to think about relative to this image. Let's back up and go all the way back to the beginning in George's image. And there's a reason why I'm doing this a slow way. I know there's a much faster way to do it, but you're about to see why I didn't do it the fast way. One other thing I wanted to mention real quick here at the end is the idea of implied visual pathways and energy. This is an image where once I created the symmetry in the background, I thought about, what happens if I flip this foreground part? And so I did. And it's amazing how, at least to my eye, it'd be interesting to hear from other people how out of balance this is. And so this last takeaway from this today is, and this is more advanced from a composition standpoint, it's not just the shapes, it's not just the way they separate or don't separate, it's not positive and negative space shape, it's not just rhythm and a lot of basic things that we talk about. Something else I'd encourage you to start looking at in your images is how a dominant subject like this, a high contrast subject that implies a visual pathway, how much effect that can have on how we compose things. And it's interesting in this image how when we flip it like that, a big part of the reason why it doesn't work is because this energy gets blocked, and because this pushes in this direction and is high contrast, it needs things over here to balance that push. To be fair, these two high contrast ideas over here are very, very visually powerful, and they need things over here to be balanced. But just thinking about implied visual energy coming out of high contrast subjects, it doesn't have to be a line there, but a lot of times it helps to have a space there for that energy to play out in the image. And I want to say a big thank you to George for submitting a beautiful image. I want to say a big thank you to all the people who participated in the Zion National Park workshop, and I want to say a big thank you to you for being here, and hope to see you tomorrow on the Daily Critique.